Welcome in, psych students. We're going to do a lecture on pain and describe basically what that is and different ways that we can actually eliminate pain. So pain's a really interesting sense because it is a combination of not only a sensation, but also an emotional experience. Sensation meaning tissue damage, you've been injured, and emotion, of course, the anguish and crying that often associates pain. So psychologically, we're very interested in this one. The area of the brain responsible for pain is the anterior cingulate cortex. So we know that's where pain messages are sent. We've also discovered that there is a connection to hurt feelings in this area of the brain. In other words, if you've ever gone through a painful breakup, for example, you may have noticed that not only emotionally is it disturbing, but it's almost physical at sometimes. You can almost feel the pain from a breakup. So we've discovered that that part of the brain is activated under these conditions. And we even have experiments where people have taken Tylenol and kept a log of their emotional experiences. And we found that people, as compared to a control group who are taking Tylenol, of all things, or acetaminophen, report less hurt feelings. So I guess the message there is that next time someone breaks up with you, take some Tylenol. You wouldn't even think to do that, but apparently that could actually work. Next, we're going to cover something called the gate theory of pain. This is an analogy to explain how pain works, because obviously when you're hurt, when you're injured, then that message has to travel through your spine to get to this part of the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex. So what we're saying is that the spinal cord is like a highway for pain signals, and if we cut that off, if we sever that, obviously, we can disrupt that process. So in other words, once again, using the analogy, if we shut the gate, those pain signals cannot get through, and thus you would feel less pain. So obviously, if you're in some kind of accident where your spine is crushed, you get these reports of people being paralyzed and not feeling things. That's kind of what we mean. So psychologically, we have discovered ways to reduce pain by theoretically closing this gate. Now remember, I'm not saying we're literally doing this, but psychologically, we can cut those signals off. So we're going to go through different strategies of how that could happen. The first one is very simple. If you simply distract someone, we find that they report having less pain. So to me, this is one of the easiest strategies of all time. If you simply get the person's mind off their injury, we have noticed that they actually feel less pain. As an example, as a father, I have two daughters, and they're constantly falling down and hurting themselves, that kind of thing. So the other day, my daughter was riding her bike, and she fell off her bike, skinned her knee, and was absolutely crying. And of course, being the psychologist in dealing with her, I started asking her questions. So for example, I asked her, "Hey, what did you eat for breakfast yesterday? What is your favorite color?" Now I know this sounds strange, but as soon as I started doing that and she started thinking about that, she stopped crying. In other words, her mind was kept off the pain signals, and so that seemed to work. So that's just an easy strategy. We have studies that have supported this, where if we distract people by various means, they feel less pain. Another strategy is to use a placebo. So if you guys remember from chapter 2, a placebo is a treatment that has no drugs in it. For example, a water pill or a sugar pill, for example. It does not have any drug value to it. So the point is that if we give someone a placebo and we tell them it's a strong painkiller, but in reality it's not, we have discovered that they feel less pain. So it's amazing the power of the mind. When you believe that you're going to feel better and feel less pain, we find that that could be the case. So it turns out placebos are for real. Hypnosis is another strategy we can use to reduce pain. Keep in mind, hypnosis is a very relaxed, suggestible state that people can be placed in. And so if we tell them under this state that you're no longer feeling pain and you feel better, we have found that some people can actually start to believe it. The crazy thing with this one is that I've even heard of dentists that use mild pain relievers and hypnosis when they're working on their patients. Can you imagine being drilled on without any strong drugs, simply being hypnotized with a Tylenol or something and going through that procedure? So we have some evidence that hypnosis can help with pain management. The last example here is we do have biological processes in play to help alleviate pain. So the body does come with natural painkillers. So to kind of explain this, we're going to go to something called substance P. Substance P, P for pain, so that should be easy to kind of remember, is a chemical that is secreted in the body when we're in excruciating pain. So if you've really injured yourself, this chemical is released, and of course our brain detects those signals. We've discovered that at the same time, our body releases something called endorphins. Now, endorphins are the body's natural painkillers. In fact, when we look at these guys through microscopes, we have discovered they look very similar to opiates, which are painkillers, as you guys probably know. So the point is that sometimes our body takes natural measures to combat pain. When endorphins are secreted, what they do is they block the release of substance P. So in other words, they prevent those messages from being sent, and therefore, as a human, we would experience less pain. So once again, endorphins, the way I want you to think of that, are just the body's natural painkillers. In fact, athletes often experience these. A classic case is a marathon runner, where they experience something called the runner's high. Towards the end of the race, when their muscles are really hurting and they're almost about to finish, they report a slight elation in mood, and the pain goes away and they're able to complete the race. So we think these endorphins are being secreted towards the end of a marathon race as an example to allow the racer to finish. Once again, the body's natural painkillers. All right, so our next example, and this is one that I'm not going to recommend, but we have some evidence that this may be in play. That is to induce pain to reduce it. In other words, we're creating pain to eliminate the experience of pain. So as an example, we're going to go to this chemical known as capsaicin. Some of you may not know what that is. Capsaicin is the chemical that makes peppers hot and spicy. So for example, if you ever put a habanero pepper in your mouth and it feels like it's on fire, it's because this contains this chemical capsaicin. So scientists have been able to extract this chemical from peppers, and they put it into that deep heating cream rub, you know, that cream that athletes use when their muscles ache. So if you've ever used this, let's say you've been working out and your muscles very sore, you would place this cream on your skin, and notice it feels like fire when you first put it on, but after several minutes, the pain seems to go away. So what we think is happening theoretically is this capsaicin stuff is overstimulating the neurons. See, neurons can only fire so many times per second. We've estimated it's about 1,000 times per second. So if they're already sending pain signals, and then we add fire on top of that, we're going to find that it overloads the system and the signals cannot get through. As an analogy, if you've ever driven on the freeway during rush hour and it's absolutely jam-packed, bumper to bumper, it's kind of the same thing. All the cars are trying to get through, but no one can because it's just overloaded. That's what we're saying is happening theoretically, is that capsaicin is flooding the system with these signals that the neurons simply cannot handle, and thus the person would experience a temporary loss of pain experience. So we think that capsaicin can aid us in that particular realm. All right, guys, so this concludes our short lecture here, so please progress to the next step.